Alright, welcome back to We Play Games. I'm Walker, and here we are resuming our China Stands Up campaign in Victoria 3. This is going to be episode 6. I do apologize for the interruption in production here, but I was really sick for the past couple of days, but I think we're doing better now, so we'll see what we can get done. I'm hoping we can get the entire campaign done before Monday. But our goal for China here is, of course, to get into a council republic, and I think ultimately into cooperative ownership, and I'd still very much like to get Anarchy on the books, but we've had some difficulty getting our appropriate leadership into our interest groups. But one thing that's been helpful is we do have a nihilist in control of the Industrialists. Apparently that's being patched in the official release, but at the moment we are still going, and in this case we actually are fighting a revolution against some Maori who have risen up to try to throw both us and the British out. But I think we're going to be okay here. We're just going to send a couple of big fleets down and crush that rebellion. We're being very deliberate in our growth here. We're trying really hard to make sure that anybody who we want to stay in our market ends up being our protectorate rather than a member of our customs union. Because as soon as we move into a council republic, a lot of people are going to get really mad at us. We are also enemies of both Russia and Bengal, and they are in a firm alliance, and so that alliance looks a little scary on paper, but you have to keep in mind that we have skirmish infantry and siege artillery, and these guys are running with line infantry, mobile artillery, so the moment that we can fight them again, I think we're going to, especially if we can knock Bengal out of great power status, because that means any subsequent war we can fight. We'll just take a treaty port, and then they can't embargo us anymore. But Russia, we're going to have to give the same treatment to. We really do need to knock them out of great power status. Anybody who we need the resources of in order for us to continue to grow. And as China, holy moly, are we going to need a lot of resources, kind of no matter what. So fighting the Russians, fighting the Bengalese, fighting anywhere around the world is going to be pretty helpful. We'll see who's next. But we are going to be expanding our military and then putting it to work in this episode, because I think a couple of fights with some great powers would be really fun. But one thing that we can do that would be pretty helpful in setting us up for any sort of distribution of power down would be reorganizing our government in such a way that would bring the literati in. So if, for instance, we did this, we could actually work with the literati to push through wealth voting, which the industrialists are not going to be opposed to. The scholar officials won't like it, but the industrialists view oligarchy and wealth voting as being functionally equivalent. Democratization, of course, is going to spread power down towards the interest groups that actually have more people voting for them. But, you know, despite the fact that we have both canals on the books and both under our control, our convoys are still being pressured. And I think that that's kind of the point here as China. If you're going to be doing any amount of trade or any amount of supply in the world and you're this far removed from Europe, then you really do need to make sure that you get canals on the books. They just save you an enormous number of convoys over time. But, you know, our barracks are now pretty enormous and our naval bases are pretty enormous. So I think we can actually fight a war against Russia and Bengal. So we'll go ahead and declare a rivalry against Bengal, and then we'll declare a humiliation war against them. And that is going to draw the Russians in. We'll mobilize all our generals. We'll activate some conscripts. We absolutely have enough population to support that. But we don't even really need money that much. We just need to leverage our strength and rip apart our enemies. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to liberate Orissa on Bengal as a primary war goal, in addition to humiliating them. We'll liberate Mysore as well, and then we'll add Bengali war reps just as a punitive measure, because we do want to knock Bengal out of great power status in this war. Oh, Bengal backed down. All right, that means we didn't even have to fight a war against them, and they dropped below great power status. So we can go ahead and get to work on Orissa and Mysore, and then our next war against Bengal can be for a treaty port. Poor Russia, they got all excited. Same with us, all excited for nothing. And I think we're going to try to form an alliance with Brazil, and then we're going to try to use Brazil to attack the United States. So yeah, let's fight the US. Let's see if we can pull the Brazilians closer to us instead of the US. But I think we're also going to liberate some countries here. No reason not to. We'll liberate New Africa, and we'll throw liberate New England on there as well. but we have enough money. We'll just mobilize everybody. Oh, and we got an obligation out of Japan, and because they're no longer in protect our borders, that means we can turn them into a protectorate. Awesome. Brazil has declared themselves neutral in this war. In that case, we can go ahead and add liberate New England as another primary goal, and we'll just take American war reps too. Russia has begun embargoing us, so when we're done with the US, we may need to bounce back and fight the Russians again, but that's okay. Oh my god, is the US gonna 1v1 us? They're gonna get absolutely demolished if they do. Ooh, and we got wealth voting. It's basically right on time. So we have just 1,000 parties forming in the background, and so it's gonna be pretty complicated whenever we decide to form an actual government. But fortunately, the voters will kind of tell us where their preferences are, and then we can adjust from there. It's unlikely that this is going to do enough damage to the US to knock them out of great power status, but we can always come back. And the more damage that we do to the US, of course, the easier it'll be for somebody else to pick on them. Yeah, it looks like we're just dropping Chinese troops all over the eastern seaboard. One of them for sure is going to break through, and then we can just send everybody over there. The battles are really slow in Open Beta 1.2. In 1.2, they're supposed to get a little faster, which is helpful. So we seized control of this immediate area around Washington, D.C., and now we just need to hold it until our other troops can arrive. That's easier said than done, of course, but we're going to send some naval invasions out to other areas of the U.S. to try to distract our enemies. But now we have some options in regards to the formation of our government here. We do have to have the Constitutional Association just for all of the legitimacy that the landowners are going to give us. But like, we could form this government here, and that actually puts 2 nihilists in the government alongside the scholar officials, the same thing that we had when we were looking at the Council Republic the first time. Whoa, Prussia is starting a unified Germany war against Schwarzburg of all people. Schwarzburg is not going to be strong enough to resist them on their own, so we may end up having a Germany here. Ooh, Russia sided with Schwarzburg against Prussia. So it looks like Prussia isn't going to get a free unification over there. What are the Americans going to do? Because now we're just swarming in. The Americans are trying to push back. They're really, really focused on trying to capture this territory, but unfortunately for them, I think we're going to be able to hold them, because all we need to win is to control parts of District of Columbia, and then the war will be ours. All right, we beat the US. Awesome. So we can start bankrolling New Africa and New England. Yep, they have dropped in prestige below the requirements to being a great power. Part of that is, of course, they've been humiliated, but the more damage we can do to the US, the better. Whoa, and it looks like Russia is on the losing end in this war against Prussia, so we might see German unification. Yeah, there it is, North German Federation. So now we need to make a decision. Are we ready to click Council Republic? Let's try it. There is a conflict, and there's extremely high radicalism in the monarchy movement, but unfortunately for the scholar officials, there's enough clout here and enough votes in the communication clique and the Imperial Clan Party that we can do it without the legitimacy of the landowner. This is going to put an armed forces nihilist in charge of the empire in the event that we get this through. That would be really fun. This is a pretty scary revolution moving in the background, but I think we'll be okay because of our secret police. Oh my god. Great Britain is losing in their war against Buganda. That's like the beginning of the Anglo-Zulu War all over again. Yep, looks like they signed a truce with them. We are down to 30% peasants here. Once we get really, really low, then we'll start rolling out our automation technologies. We haven't used a single automation, like pure automation, all game, but that's mostly a function of being Great Qing. Almost nobody else can afford to do that. We're only 10 more months away from malaria prevention, and then we can get to work on trench works. When we have trench works online, we're just going to start trashing our European enemies, which is good because we're gonna need it because we're gonna have a lot of enemies. But we also have critically literal 0 infamy now, so I think we'll go ahead and annex Burma. That's going to give us 15 infamy, but it's also going to give us access to a lot more resources down here, and critically it's going to hopefully get us access to more rubber, which is the biggest problem for our economy right now. Well, it looks like Burma is going to resist us, but I don't think that's going to go particularly well for them. Oh my god, we got the Council Republic. LMAO. All right, so this is going to be really complicated now because we're about to get a bunch of embargoes and a bunch of customs unions breaking down and stuff, but it's okay. We're going to say now's the time for reconciliation, so we're going to eat a couple of radicals temporarily, but that's ultimately not a big deal. The People's Republic of China is born in 1891. Now, unfortunately, the Confucian scholars and the trade unions have come together, so we need that party to break up in order for us to continue our revolution here. But in the meantime, we have a ton of legitimacy now. All right, so we found a vanguardist. I'm going to keep fishing for an anarchist somewhere, but if we can't find him, then that's okay. A vanguardist will work. Vanguardists will be in favor of cooperative ownership instead of laissez-faire, and that's good enough for me. I guess we're gonna do this revolution using the armed forces. There's a certain truism to that, right? The only real downside to vanguardist is that they're not particularly big fans of anarchy, but because they're really, really strongly opposed to wealth voting, if we manage to get vanguardist in control, that's still good enough for us. And of course, because we had all these people leave our market, they did take some of the demand with them. But we can go ahead and fix that by just exporting things to them, and if these guys are dumb enough to try to resist us, then hey, we can always take treaty ports. We are now sort of diplomatic pariahs in the world. It's going to be very difficult for anyone to be invited into our market the good old-fashioned way. Now we'll have a patriotic party that looks like it's going to do pretty well, and an agrarian party that looks like it's going to do insanely well. Which that makes sense. Trade unions, rural folk. Ceylon and Baroda are leaving our customs union. It's okay. And all of this only made possible because of Gaolu. Okay, so we can make a new government now without the industrialists, and it's 60 legitimacy. That's, I think, pretty reasonable. And that's going to allow us to get some new institutions on the books, too, if we get them through. Workers' protection is very powerful because of this minimum wage. Minimum wage is going to push money away from the owners in most of these buildings and towards the people already working there. We're not going to juice it too much because we are going to get some minimum wage kind of indirectly whenever we switch into cooperative ownership. But I think getting a level 1 or a level 2 worker protection, given that we have enough bureaucracy to eat it, will definitely help us get that through. Because the big problem for the trade unions right now is their average wealth is so low. They're at 12.4 versus 32.7 on the behalf of the industrialists there. It's true that we're going to be spiking our unemployed by building a bunch of agricultural buildings, but that's a temporary problem, and I think it's going to be a long-term solution for us, because we do want to be making use of all of our unused arable land whenever we can. These buildings now are going to be pretty high productivity, and we want to use that money there to help bolster the strength of our industrial economy. I think we can fight a war against Bengal, another one. So let's go ahead and take a treaty port here in South Bengal. We'll mobilize everybody, and we'll see how much of the Russian support really emerges. Yeah, let's add Liberate Yakutia here, and sure, we'll make them release Ukraine as well. In the event that the Russians decide to actually fight this one out, we're going to make it painful for them. We'll have them liberate Assam as well, just for good measure. Bengal back down. Yep, makes sense. So now we're just going to get around all these idiots embargoing us by just grabbing treaty ports wherever we can. And anywhere we see a revolutionary movement emerge, we'll grab ourselves on. We'll latch ourselves onto that one. Oh yeah. All right, so we're up to 56% on worker protection. That means we might get that done next roll. And you know what? It might be time for us to just go ahead and annex Vrystadt and Transvaal, because we just need coal, and that's another 100 that we get for an extremely small amount of infamy. Oh man, we got workers' protections. But we could also just go ahead and click cooperative ownership. At this point, we have both the trade union and the rural folk in government here, and the only people opposed to cooperative ownership are going to be the industrialists. Let's see what we get. This is the true danger of playing as China on Wiki 3, by the way, is that inevitably you're going to reach the point in your industrialization when your pops are still very, very plentiful, but your resources are not. Just as in a normal campaign where you kind of have to decide where do you put your oil, in a game as China, you have to decide where do you put your coal. Oh, baby, we just got trench works online. Now Europe is going to be in a lot of trouble. I think we need to wait just a little bit so that way our troops recover from being trained as trench infantry, but I think with a slightly larger navy, we should be able to start getting great powers just back down to our demands. Our infamy is low enough. Let's just conquer Transvaal. We'll start our war that way, and then if one of these Europeans is dumb enough to jump in, we can fix that. Oh my god, we're down to 12.8%, 11.1% peasants. And right now we really are just running basically no authority use, just so that way we can ensure that we have the fastest enactment time, because we really do want to just get these laws done. And unfortunately, we can't come up with enough legitimacy at the moment to make sure that we're in righteous government. So if you have to get a little bit of legitimacy or enactment speed through your authority, you can. It's highly dependent on what your economy looks like. Come on, cooperative ownership. 4 more days. Let's see it. Woo! Yeah! Alright, we got cooperative ownership. So this is a new thing here in 1.2. But it's going to shift around the nature of ownership in our society pretty meaningfully. Now we have a worker cooperative, which means instead of having upper strata, we're going to have just a giant lower strata and middle strata collecting tons of money there. But this is going to be a dramatic change for our economy. Look, we're already down to just 1.3, 1.4 billion GDP, and it's because of the nature of cooperative ownership, right? We've stripped out most of our really expensive pops, but in exchange that means we have all this fine art that we can just export, luxuries that we can export, and the trade unions would actually endorse the move to anarchy, and they've moved into the patriotic party. So now we have the agrarian party and the patriotic party in power, putting the literati and the industrialists on the outside. That looks like a pretty good organization for us to try to get anarchy through. It's going to radicalize the industrialists, but there aren't going to be a lot of them in a very short period of time. And we don't really need this authority. It's mostly just there. Boy, if we get all of this done in one episode, I'd be really excited. I'm having a blast playing this, but with the 1.2 patch imminent, I'd like to get this out either today or tomorrow. And yep, just as I predicted, our GDP is going to start coming back in a big way. Wow, the upper strata is not doing terribly well, though. But we are getting plus 40 million right now, plus 44 million loyalists from standard of living increases. And that's why switching into one of these advanced methods of ownership in the late game can be really helpful. You don't have to go that way. You can, of course, get lots of money and power to everybody by just moving through workplace safety. We're up to 55% enacting anarchy here, so we might actually get it through. That would be so cool. Anarchy isn't even necessarily, like, powerful for us, because it's just going to replace the way that we vote. And it's going to basically just distribute all power down into the hands of all of the pops. But that is going to mean an incredibly powerful trade union and rural folk, and pretty strong armed forces, too. Oh my god, and Gaolu is still alive. I feel like at this point, he probably regrets the decisions that he's made as a nihilist, but maybe he simply accepts that this is the way, right? Maybe he's actually a Taoist in a sense. Yeah, we got anarchy. Alright, cool. That's going to temporarily crash our legitimacy, but that's a temporary problem. We can fix it pretty easily by just clicking a new government. There we go. Legitimate. You know what? I think actually we're going to call that the episode, and then that might even be the end of the series. We might do another one of those sort of retrospective, the same way we did with Her Majesty's government. I think the retrospective for us mostly is going to be, boy, as China at least, you're gonna really struggle just to find resources in the world unless you like literally conquer the whole thing. But then at that point, then you have to deal with the pops in the territories you're conquering. So it's pretty tricky. But yeah, I think China definitely has stood up here because we are the #1 great power by an enormous margin. We have supreme control over our immediate area. Yes, we have a rival in Russia, but what are they gonna do about it? And our GDP is just much, much bigger than any of our European competition. Just looking over our ledger, the next closest is France, which has like not even a tenth of our GDP. Oh, and we actually have one of the highest SOLs in the game too. And that's due, I'm sure, to cooperative ownership. So yeah, I'm gonna say that that's the end of this episode. I'll see how we feel about recording another episode tomorrow. I am still getting over sickness, but I think we probably will have time to do a little bit. But yeah, that's Walker, and that's China Stands Up here on We Play Games. Take care.